All right, let's dive into one of the most wild stories in all of history. We're talking about how a private company, a company, managed to build a whole system to take over and rule the entire Indian subcontinent. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just about making a quick buck. Nope, this was about creating a machine designed for absolute control. So let's pull back the curtain and see how they actually built this thing.
So the big question is, right? How in the world does a bunch of traders, literally thousands of miles away from Britain, end up running an entire empire? Well, let me tell you, it wasn't a fluke, not at all. This was a calculated, deliberate design, a machine built for a very specific purpose.
And here we have it, the real reasons behind the whole operation. You can just forget any of that talk you might have heard about a civilizing mission. The reality was much, much simpler. It all boiled down to three things. Number one, make a ton of money for the company. 2, squeeze even more profit out of their new Indian territories. And 3, the big one, maintain and strengthen their grip on India at all costs. Every single decision they made, everything we're about to look at, was designed to serve one of these three goals. That's it.
Okay, so to pull all that off, they couldn't just wing it. They needed a system. And not just any system. They needed a purpose-built machine, an engine designed for one thing, control. And this machine, as we're about to see, was built on 3 massive pillars that held up the entire structure of British rule in India.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the big problem the company was facing. Then, we'll dig into each of those 3 pillars, the civil service, the army, and the police. And finally, we'll tie it all together and reveal the real design behind the whole thing.
So, let's talk about the company's big headache. After 1765, they suddenly found themselves in charge of Bengal. The problem? They were still a trading company, full of merchants. These guys were paid peanuts and told they could do their own private trading on the side. Can you guess what happened? Yep, complete and utter corruption. It was out of control, threatening to sink the whole operation. You had traders trying to act like rulers, and honestly, it was a total disaster.
So to clean up this mess, they built their very first pillar, the civil service. Think of it as the steel frame of their new empire. It was meant to be the rigid, unbreakable backbone of their entire administration. Its job was to restore order, make sure the money kept flowing, and, this is the most important part, guarantee absolute loyalty to Britain.
Now, to really get what was going on, you have to understand the mindset. And this quote from the Governor General, Lord Cornwallis, wow, it says it all. Every native of Hindustan is corrupt. He truly believed that Indians were fundamentally corrupt and couldn't be trusted. And look, this wasn't just some off-the-cuff remark. This belief became the official reason for locking Indians out of any real position of power in their own country. So, working from that assumption, Cornwallis basically built a system to make his British officials corruption-proof. He came at it from 3 sides. First, he jacked up their salaries, making them the highest-paid civil servants on the planet. The idea was, if you pay them a fortune, they won't need to take bribes. Second, he put a stop to all private trading, no more side hustles. And third, promotions were now based on how long you'd been there, your seniority, not who you knew. Okay, great, but now they had a new problem. You've got all these well-paid Brits showing up in India, and they're just kids. They have no idea what they're doing, they don't speak the languages, they don't know the local customs, nothing. So in 1800, another guy, Lord Wellesley, steps in. He sets up Fort William College right there in Calcutta, basically to teach these young guys how to actually govern the country they were supposed to be in charge of. And you can see the whole system evolving right here. It starts with Cornwallis trying to stamp out corruption, then Wellesley adds the training component, and then comes the big one, a real game changer in 1853. The Charter Act gets rid of the whole it's-who-you-know system and brings in an open competitive exam. On paper, this was huge. It meant anyone who was smart enough could get in, and sure enough, in 1864, Satindranath Sugar did it. He became the first Indian to ever pass the exam.
But, and this is a huge but, open didn't exactly mean fair. In practice, the civil service was split in 2. You had the covenanted service. These were the top jobs, the positions with all the power and the massive salaries. And those were kept almost entirely for the British. Then you had the uncovenanted service, the grunt work, the lower-level jobs with low pay. And that's where Indians were hired. The system was genius, in a pretty ruthless way. All the power stayed in British hands, while the actual day-to-day work was done by cheap Indian labor.
All right,
On to pillar number 2. And if the civil service was the brains of the operation, the army was definitely the muscle. This was the sharp end of the stick. The army was the ultimate tool for conquest, for control, and for absolutely crushing anyone who got in their way.
Really, the army had 3 main jobs. First, inside India, its purpose was to conquer any Indian rulers who were still independent and to put down any rebellions. Second, it had to defend the empire's borders from other European rivals. And third, it wasn't just for defense. It was used to expand British power all over the place, from fighting wars in China to campaigns in Africa.
Okay, now look at this chart. This is just incredible. By 1857, the vast majority of the company's army, a whopping 86%, was made up of Indian soldiers. Only 14% were British. Just let that sink in for a second. The British conquered and controlled India with an army of Indians.
So you have to be asking, how is that even possible? Well, it comes down to 2 things. First, while the regular soldiers were Indian, every single officer was British. All of them. The highest rank an Indian soldier could ever hope to achieve was Subedar, which was still below the lowest ranking British officer. And second, and this is super important, the idea of being Indian hadn't really taken hold yet. A soldier from, say, Bengal didn't feel like he was betraying his countrymen by fighting against the Marathas. His loyalty was to the regiment, to the people who paid him.
And that brings us to our third and final pillar, the police force. If the army was there to deal with wars and rebellions, the police were created for the everyday stuff, maintaining law and order on the streets and just making sure the whole colonial machine ran smoothly.
And guess who shows up again? Lord Cornwallis. His big idea here was to centralize everything. See, traditionally, local landowners called zemindars handled policing, but Cornwallis didn't trust them. Their loyalty was local, not to the company, so he took that power away from them. He set up a modern police force with districts and police stations, a system that reported directly back to the British, and only to the British.
Okay, so we've looked at all 3 pillars, the civil service, the army, and the police. Now it's time to zoom out and look at the big picture, because when you put them all together, one single unifying idea just screams out at you. The entire system was designed to keep Indians away from any real power.
And I want to be super clear about this. This wasn't some unspoken rule or a coincidence. It was official, written down policy. The Charter Act of 1793 literally said that any job paying more than £500 a year, a huge sum back then, was reserved only for Englishmen. End of story. And that applied to everything: the civil service, the army, the police, the whole shebang.
So even when they introduced that so-called open exam, they just built a whole new set of walls to keep Indians out. I mean, just think about it. The exam was only held in London, you had to speak perfect English, and the subjects they tested you on? Classical Greek and Latin. It was a curriculum that had absolutely nothing to do with the education system in India. It was an obstacle course designed for Indians to fail. And then, as if all that wasn't enough, they delivered the final kick. They lowered the maximum age you could even take the exam to just 19. 19! That made it pretty much impossible for an Indian student to finish school back home and then get to London in time to even have a shot. So, this all comes back to that phrase we used earlier, the steel frame. And that's exactly what it was. This entire machine, the civil service, the army, the police, it was a rigid, unbreakable structure built for one thing and one thing only: to keep Britain in charge and protect British profits. It was never, ever designed to actually serve the people of India.
So let's just recap. You've got the civil service, Cornwallis's baby, to run the administration and keep power in European hands. You've got the army, for conquest and control, using Indian soldiers led by British officers. And you've got the police, another Cornwallis special, for keeping order on the ground. 3 pillars, one single powerful machine designed for colonial rule.
And that leaves us with one last, really important thought. This whole system, this entire machine, was built for control, right? Not for serving the public. But here's the thing. When independence finally came, the new countries of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh didn't start from scratch. They inherited this exact machine. So the question we have to leave you with is this: how much of that original steel frame, that top-down, we-know-best attitude, is still rattling around in the government bureaucracies of the subcontinent today? It's a heavy legacy and something definitely worth thinking about.